Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to hit rank 9 with on the arena ladder. As you can see from the screenshot here, I'm currently 25-2 with this list, so it's been performing really well for me so far, and I've also already written a full in-depth deck guide article about this deck for MTG Zone Premium that will have a bunch more details, a full breakdown of all the card choices, how I changed the deck for best of one, and a full sideboard guide as well, so if you want to check that out and you're a premium member, I'll have a link to that down at the top of the description as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Izzet Chorus Wizards deck in Historic. Now obviously Izzet Wizards as an archetype has been around in Historic for a really long time now, and at times has definitely been the best deck in the format, but it has fallen off recently, I think largely since MH3 came out, because Wizards didn't really get that many tools itself, but all of the other top tier decks in the format got a bunch of new tools, their decks sped up a lot, and the more conventional builds of Izzet Wizards has really struggled to keep up against those sorts of decks. So if you're not familiar with this list, or the archetype as a whole, it's basically a deck that runs a bunch of cheap, efficient creatures that benefit from you casting instants and sorceries, stuff like Soulscar Mage, Symmetry Sage, Slickshot Show Off, and then a bunch of instants and sorceries to trigger your creatures, whether that's interaction, like Play with Fire, whether that's card advantage, like, Flame of an Aura or Consider, for example. And basically the deck is good at grinding into longer games because of the card advantage spells, but it's also capable of applying pressure really quickly because of your quick threats that grow, like your Symmetry Sage and your Slickshot Show Off. So, like I said, I do feel like the archetype has struggled to keep up recently, but I wanted to return to it for a couple of reasons. First of all, because I kind of felt like just tweaking the deck to run a bit more interaction really helps to improve its position in the current metagame. And additionally, we also got a recently buffed chorus cards in Rival Chanty and Hint of the Ages, which I think are a really good fit in the Izzet Wizards shell. So first of all, what I want to talk about is the main difference between this and more conventional builds is that we are running a lot more cheap interaction. We're running 4 Play with Fire, 4 Rival Chanty, 4 Wizard's Lightning, 4 Flame of an Aura, and also 4 Snapcaster Mage to be able to flash these back at instant speed as early as turn 3, because obviously these all cost 1 mana when you have the Snapcaster Mage in play. So the reason I think this improves the position in the current metagame is Historic right now, the most powerful decks in my mind are Boros, 4-Color Samwise, Mardu Sacrifice, Jeskai Control, and Mono Green Devotion. And I feel like even though this particular list of Izzet Wizards is slightly slower than the more conventional list, because we're not running Reckless Charge in the main deck, for example, I still feel like you have a good matchup against Mono Green Devotion. That deck has basically no interaction, and you can race against them a lot of times. And then obviously post-sideboard we can board in the Reckless Charge. This is kind of the main matchup I've got this in the sideboard for. So I still feel like one of the main reasons to run Wizards was the good Devotion matchup. I don't feel like that's really changed. I still feel like that matchup's good. However, the more conventional builds of Wizards I felt really struggled against decks like Boros Auras, where, if you can't kill their creature before they get a Sheltered by Ghost on it, that's basically game over, because they can take out one of your creatures, make it impossible to kill because of the ward, and then start hitting you with, a lifelinker as well. And there's obviously a bunch of other powerful starts that they can have to be able to race you as well. Similarly, against 4-Color Samwise and Mardu Sacrifice, they're very good at buying time, they're very good at digging for their key creatures, so if you don't have a high density of removal there, it's also very difficult to race. And so just running some cheap, extra cheap interaction is really good at ensuring that we can keep Borosaurus off the board, we can keep the key creatures from 4-Color Samwise and Mardu Sacrifice off the board. So you do play a little bit more like a control deck, but you're kind of like a tempo deck at the same time, right? Because whilst you are going to be holding up your removal, especially against decks like Boros Auras, because killing their creatures before they go out of range of your burn spells is incredibly important. But with the spare mana that you have, you're getting your, Symmetry Sages, your Slickshot Show-Offs, your Soulscar Mages down, and applying pressure at the same time, which really helps to improve those matchups as well. So I feel like just shifting the deck away from Reckless Charge in the main deck, which I don't really feel is as necessary anymore, to just running more extra interaction really helps to improve your matchup against a lot of the best decks in the format right now, in my opinion. And then, like I said, the second reason why I really wanted to return to this is because these new buffed chorus cards are very interesting to me, and I do think they're definitely Historic playable for sure. Now, obviously, the big issue with these cards is they're both below rate the first one you cast, right? 2 mana draw 1 at instant speed is really bad, and 1 mana deal 2 it isn't the worst for Historic standards, right? If Lightning Bolt was legal, then things would be different, but with Galvanic Discharge being nerfed recently and Lightning Bolt not being legal, 2 mana deal 2, outside of Shove Aside is kind of on par for Historic. So even casting Rival Chanty for starting Intensity 2 isn't that bad. And there are very few creatures that you need to be able to kill that have 3 starting toughness outside of Strict Proc. So that's the only one I can really think of. But, everything else that you need to be able to kill on curve, like Delighted Halfling against Devotion, Light Pause and Core Spirit Dancer against Auras, Guide of Souls, Marionette Apprentice, Ajani against Mardu Sacrifice, Samwise against the 4-color deck. So I don't feel like Ribble Shanty is actually that bad to cast on the first copy, but these scale really well into the longer game. Ribble Shanty going up, upwards to 4 or 5 is really effective against Mono Green Devotion at taking out their bigger creatures, and just, once this does get higher, it just takes out anything for 1 mana. But Hymn to the Ages is the main card I was very excited about here, because like I said, first copy, 2 mana, instant, draw 1 is bad. But once you get to starting intensity 2, that is when things really start to roll. 2 mana, draw 2 instant speed is already above rate for historic. And this scales, higher and higher as the game goes on. And this is another reason why I'm running Snapcaster Mage in this particular deck. Because not only does it work very well at ensuring that we can keep these, Borosauras, Mardu Sacrifice, 4-color Samwise, these kind of dominant creature decks in check, because we can, interact on turns 1 or 2, on turn 1 and 2, then on turn 3, Snapcaster Mage to interact again. So it's really good at ensuring that we can keep those creature decks off the board. But it also works really well with the chorus cards, because if you Snapcaster Mage, Ribble Shanty, not only does it increase the intensity for the copy that you're casting from the graveyard, but it also increases the intensity of all other cards in your hand. So say, for example, you go Ribble Shanty on turn 1 to kill a creature, then on turn 3 you go Snapcaster Mage, flash back the Ribble Shanty. If you have a Hymn to the Ages in your hand, that's already going to be a 2 mana draw 3, which is insane. So Hymn to the Ages is really good at just ensuring that you come out ahead on card advantage, because one of the downsides of running a very high density of these, very cheap burn spells is that it can result in you running out of gas if you just fire these off early. So Hymn to the Ages, especially with Snapcaster Mage, just really helps you pull ahead in longer games. And then additionally, the last of the big 5 decks that I didn't mention in Jeskai Control can be a very tricky matchup for Wizards traditionally, because sweepers punish you for overextending, Flage punishes you for underextending, and they have way more powerful proactive lines now, like Strict Proctor into Flage, and then Null Drifter as well is very difficult to attack past with this deck. So having Snapcaster Mage, which is way more resilient compared to a Dreadhorde Arcanist, for example, and a Hymn to the Ages, just gives you ways to overtake the bigger control and mid-range decks in terms of card advantage, because once this gets to intensity 4 or 5, you're just going to be miles ahead in terms of card advantage, because this is going to draw you into another Hymn to the Ages or another Snapcaster Mage, which you can use to flash it back to just ensure that you're burying the opponent in card advantage. And everything else in your deck is so cheap that you'll be able to empty your hand pretty quickly once you do refuel with it. So I've been really liking these cards in the list. Now, one other card that I want to talk about here, when I'm talking about Snapcaster Mage, is Dreadhorde Arcanist, because typically Arcanist is run in this spot. But I prefer Snapcaster Mage for a couple of reasons. First of all, because, like I said, Jeskai Control is a deck that you need to be prepared for, and I do feel like Snapcaster Mage does really help improve that matchup. Now, obviously, Strict Proctor does shut it down, which is a little bit awkward, but outside of that, this is just so much more resilient at helping you guarantee that you get 2-for-1 value off it, compared to Arcanist, which is easy to kill, very vulnerable if you're using Reckless Charge on it, and needs to attack as well. Whereas Snapcaster Mage obviously is a little bit slower, but in grindier games is way more resilient to interaction, which is pretty big. Secondly, like I said, against the creature decks like the Borosauras and your 4-color Samwise, Mardu Sacrifice, and a few others as well, the ability to use this on turn 3 just to kill something else is huge, especially against a deck like Borosauras, where the difference between leaving them with one creature and wiping them off the board entirely can be the difference between winning and losing. And then thirdly, I feel like the ability to use your interaction at instant speed is so important right now, especially against a deck like Borosauras, where if you're reliant on an Arcanist to take out their creature, if they just play a Light Pause and then put a Demonic Ruckus on it, then Arcanist is just way too slow. And then similarly against the 4-color Samwise deck, where they're capable of comboing off at instant speed, Dreadhorde Arcanist isn't as good there either. So I prefer Snapcaster Mage for all of those reasons. It does make the proactive game plan, your ability to goldfish, a little bit slower, but I just feel like in the current metagame, it's just better all round, apart from maybe against Mono Green Devotion. Then one other thing that I want to touch on when we're talking about Snapcaster Mage and all the extra burn spells that we've got here is we do have really good reach in the late game now, because we've got 4 Play with Fire, 4 Wizards Lightning. Snapcaster Mage can obviously recast these from the graveyard, so oftentimes it's worth just forcing through damage when you can, even if it puts you on the back foot, because if you get the opponent down to a low life total, you can often just finish them off with burn spells, which is really nice. So that's another advantage of running a high density of these burn spells as well. Now, outside of that, we've obviously got Symmetry Sage and Soulscar Mage at the 1-drop slot. Symmetry Sage, obviously the better card because it just has a faster clock. Flying is also really relevant, especially against the sacrifice decks, because they're very good at clogging up the ground. Same sort of thing with Mono Green Devotion, although they do obviously have reach creatures as well, but Symmetry Sage is generally the better of the two. But Soulscar Mage, the ability to shrink your opponent's creatures is very relevant, especially against the Mono Green Devotion, because it allows you to freely attack into Cavalier of Thorns and then potentially shrink it with a Flame of Anor at instant speed, for example. So even though Soulscar Mage, it not having flying is a pretty big knock on it, the ability to shrink the opponent's creatures, especially at instant speed, is really nice. Then Slickshot Show Off, just the fastest clock in this deck. +2/+0 for every spell you cast is really, really strong, and especially if you've got this in multiples, can just close out the game from 20 life in a single turn in some situations. And the ability to plot it is really, really big as well, especially if you feel like the opponent's holding open interaction, because if you've got it plotted, it basically forces the opponent to continually waste mana every turn holding up interaction, and then, you can just hold on to this until you have a big turn, and then just apply a ton of pressure at once. So the plot on this is really useful, especially against interactive decks. Already gone over Snapcaster Mages, kind of another threat that allows us to reuse our interaction, buff the chorus cards, and kill stuff at instant speed, which is very relevant. Then we've also got Consider here as just extra card selection. I feel like when we're running Snapcaster Mage, it's really important to have at least a full play set of one of these card selection tools to just ensure that we can cast Snapcaster Mage on turn 3, even if the opponent doesn't have anything that we want to use our burn spells on, which is pretty big, because having to wait until turn 4 for Snapcaster Mage is really clunky. This deck still does want to be applying pressure, and I think Consider's generally the best of the bunch here. I've seen some people run Sleight of Hand in the past, but I feel like the ability to trigger your creatures at instant speed, especially with cards like Soulscar Mage, is so important, and we can also make better use of the Surveil in this list because of Snapcaster Mage as well, so I think Consider's the best option there. And then obviously we've got Flame of Anor. This has been arguably the best card in Wizards since it got printed, basically. Even on its face, if you don't have a wizard in play, all three of the modes are pretty useful. 3 mana, draw 2 at instant speed is about on par for historic, but the ability to kill a big creature, especially dealing 5 damage, is really huge against cards like Shieldred if that's being run, and then Polukranos Reborn against Mono Green Devotion, for example. And then destroying artifacts can come up against decks like Belcher and Affinity, for example, but getting 2 modes on this is just an absolute game breaker in a lot of situations, and will just really pull you ahead. And this is kind of another advantage of being able to plot Slickshot Show Off as well. Even if you don't think the opponent's got interaction, you can just plot it, and then on turn 3, assuming you got your 3rd land, you can just cast it, and then basically guarantee that you're going to get both modes of Flame of Anor off, unless the opponent has a counter spell. So Flame of Anor still really, really strong in this deck, and I don't think I would ever run less than 4. Then we've also got Gigantha here, is basically just a free resource. Now, most games this doesn't come up, but the games it does typically are going to be grindy games, so having just a free 5/5 in those matchups really helps to pull you ahead, especially if both players come down to top decking. Then mana base wise, nothing too crazy here. We only got 20 lands, which is obviously a little bit low, but we do have a lot of early card selection. We've got Consider, Hymn to the Ages, and Flame of Anor that can keep the card selection rolling as well. In terms of the lands themselves, nothing too special here either. We got one of each basic. Otawara, which gives you outs to random stuff, like if you come across a 9 lives Enchantress deck, you can use this to break the lock, which is really nice. And then if you do come up against a reanimated deck, putting like a Serra's Emissary in play, we can dig through our deck towards this to give us an out, which is nice. Den of the Bugbear just gives you additional reach in the late game, especially if, against interactive decks, this is really nice as well. And then the rest of the mana base is just all the dual lands. Fiery Islet is another utility land here that I was kind of wanting to run 3 copies of, because this does add up. The damage on this does definitely add up as the game goes on, and having only Fiery Islets as your lands is a little bit awkward and can deal a lot of damage. But I really wanted a lot of pure blue-red jewels just to ensure that we have good mana fixing, and in longer games being able to crack this to draw cards, especially when you have a bunch of creatures and need to find an instant or sorcery to trigger them, is really huge. So even though the damage on this does add up, I feel like 4 copies is worth it in most situations. Plus, there aren't really too many decks in the format I mean, obviously Goblin Bombardment is used in both Mardu and 4-color, but there aren't too many decks like Burn that really punish you for taking damage off your land, so it's not felt too bad to me so far. So that's the main deck. Like I said, I really like this build where you run a lot of cheap interaction to help improve your matchups against Boros Auras, 4-color Samwise, and Mardu Sacrifice, where I felt like conventional builds of Wizards has kind of struggled so far. And then the chorus cards, just, you know, especially Hymn to the Ages, really helps to ensure that you can pull ahead in longer games if it goes to that. And then Ribble Chanty, again, is just another way that we can run extra cheap interaction that also scales well into longer games as well. And then moving on to the sideboard, we got a couple copies of Spell Pierce here, which is mainly for control at stopping, you know, their interaction, largely sweepers because then you're trading up on mana, but also using this to stop their top end like the One Ring or Teferi Hero of Dominaria is very useful as well. And we got a couple of copies of Tamiyo, again for these kind of grindy matchups against control and mid-range, where this can, you know, snowball card advantage if the opponent doesn't kill it straight away. And with, you know, considering Hymn to the Ages and Flame of Anor, it's not too difficult to flip this either. And then once you do flip this, it's a threat that's very difficult for them to kill. It dodges a lot of their sweepers like Divine Purge if they're choosing to run that as well. So I really like Tamiyo in the grindy matchups. Then we got a couple copies of Pithing Needle. So this is for a variety of matchups. Against Mardu Sacrifice, I always use this to name Goblin Bombardment. Against 4-color Samwise, game 1, I typically either name Cauldron Familiar or Bombardment, depending on which is more threatening at the time. And then post-sideboard, I tend to just name Goblin Bombardment, because most 4-color Samwise lists tend to trim on Bartolome, making them more reliant on Bombardment to combo off. You can bring this in against Mono Green Devotion to name Kiora or Khan. You can bring it in against Shifting Woodland to name their key card. Bring it in against Belcher to shut off their combo as well. So this has a very wide variety of matchups that I like bringing it in against. But specifically, you know, the main use for this is against Goblin Bombardment, because I feel like that is one of the best cards against your deck once it gets going on. Then we've got 2 copies of Surgical Extraction. So I wanted some graveyard hate here, mainly for, you know, Shifting Woodland and Reanimator. And I feel like Surgical is just the best option for this deck because it's instant speed, which is really useful. You don't have to invest any mana in it up front, as opposed to options like Ghost Vacuum, Soulguide Lantern, or Unlicensed Hearse, where getting your graveyard hate in play interrupts your ability to curve out, whereas this being essentially free is really nice at avoiding that. The extraction effect is also a nice upside, especially against the more dedicated graveyard decks you're bringing it in against. You know, extracting an Omniscience against the Woodland deck is huge. Extracting a Reanimation target against Reanimator is huge as well. Plus, it's a free instant as well, so we can also potentially use this offensively, right? If the opponent's tapped out and we've got a Slick Shot show off and we're 2 damage off lethal, we can just fire off Surgical to buff your creature and get lethal through there as well. So big fan of Surgical, and obviously it can be flashback with Snapcaster as well, which can be particularly brutal. You know, if you extract 2 of their key graveyard pieces. And we've got 3 copies of Reckless Charge. So, as I mentioned previously, this is predominantly here for Mono Green Devotion, just to increase our Goldfish, but I also tend to bring this in against any linear deck that doesn't have a ton of interaction. So I'll also tend to bring this in against decks like Shifting Woodland, where they basically run no creatures unless they're running Kona, so we want to be cutting almost all of our burn spells, and bringing in Reckless Charge just helps us be able to race in those sorts of matchups as well, but mainly here for Mono Green Devotion, where we just want to be gold fishing a little bit quicker. And then finally we've got 3 copies of Stone of Urek here, which is basically here exclusively for Mardu Sacrifice and 4-color Samwise, because it just shuts off so much of their deck. It shuts off the death triggers on Unlucky Witness and Goblin Trap Finder and Marionette Apprentice. Against 4-color Samwise, it shuts off their combo as well. Shuts off Ajani from flipping. So this just really neuters their whole deck. So I really like 3 copies, because drawing the first one just really shuts down so much of their deck, to the point where I feel like they're really going to struggle unless they kill it. And if they kill it, if you have a second one in hand, just run it out again, and their deck is kind of, you know, back at really struggling again. So I really like 3 copies of Stone of Urek, just because you really want to draw the first copy as often as possible. And then you can also bring this in as slow graveyard hate. If you're up against a deck like Shifting Woodland, for example, and you just want to increase your density of graveyard hate, you could consider bringing in 1 or 2 extra copies of this. Although having to hold open 2 mana to activate it instant speed is a little bit awkward in this list, but mainly here for the sacrifice decks. So that's the deck overall. I've been really happy with it. Obviously, Wizards is kind of a tried and tested deck in Historic, but I do feel like twisting the archetypes slightly to have a bit more interaction helps a lot against the creature decks, which are quite prominent. And I also feel like these chorus cards fit really well into this shell, especially alongside Snapcaster Mage. So I've been really happy with this list so far. So next up I've got some gameplay. I've just got 5 matches I was playing with this deck on the ladder, so you guys can see it in action. If you've got any questions about the deck at all, definitely let me know in the comments. If you're a premium member, don't forget to check out the full article. It's over 4,000 words deep dive on this deck if you want to check the ins and outs of it. Either way, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Big up. Okay, so we're on the play here, and I mean, there is maybe some hands that you'd want to keep with Consider, but no threats, and I'd also want the land to be a dual land as well. This one I think I can keep, though, and it might look a little bit weird putting back the Soulscar Mage over a land here, but I think the ability to curve out Wizard's Lightning into Flame of Anor, especially against the Lurrus deck, is really big. Okay, so it looks like, I'd assume we're against Boros Auras here, which is pretty big, so again, you know, there's maybe an argument to keeping Soulscar Mage, but had we not drawn the third land here and potentially missed out on using Flame of Anor on this key turn where they could play a Spirit Dancer or a Light Pause, is pretty big. Okay, so they just go for a Giver. Okay, double Giver of Runes, that's annoying. I would obviously much prefer them to just run out a Spirit Dancer or Light Pause, but we're going to fire off Flame of Anor here, because if we keep them, well, if we wait, they can obviously just continuously protect each Giver of Runes with the other one, so taking one out now means that we can hopefully take out the other one before they can get like a Spirit Dancer or a Light Pause online here. Okay, there is a Spirit Dancer, so that's a concern. But having said that, they're already at 13. We can get another Symmetry Sage down this turn, which is pretty big. So I'm going to lead on Consider, because I'd really want to find burn spells here if possible. If we can find 2 burn spells here, we're golden, right? We can fire one off at the Giver, and then in response to them activating it, we can fire one off at the Spirit Dancer. So just going to surveil anything that isn't a burn spell here. Okay, going to go for the second Consider here. If we find another burn spell, we can do that line where, like I just told, where we kill the Giver and then take out the Spirit Dancer. Snapcaster Mage is an interesting line. Okay, we didn't end up finding it, but I'm going to fire off Ribble Chanty on the Giver of Runes now, just to play around Shard Mage's Rescue. Presumably they activate in response, right? So unfortunately we didn't have another burn spell to fire off now, which does mean the Spirit Dancer gets to live, but we do also get a second Symmetry Sage down this turn. And obviously we got him to the Ages next turn. This is still a bit of a dodgy spot here, right? If they can get like a Sheltered by Ghost down, or even like an Ethereal Armor. Oh, okay, speak of the devil. So yeah, they're going to grow out of range of our burn spells pretty quickly here, but we're still winning the race. Unless they have Sheltered by Ghosts, they're not going to be able to gain life back here. And, you know, if we draw a Play with Fire or a Wizard's Lightning off this Hymn to the Ages and they don't get a Reach blocker in play, we can just put them down to 1 now off the Symmetry Sage, and then so I'm just trying to think whether it's best to go for the Hymn or the Flame of Anor. I think I'll go for the Hymn, because if we find a Consider, we can potentially fire that off to find a burn spell here. We're basically just trying to find Flame of Anor or Wizard's Lightning. Sorry, not Flame of Anor. Play with Fire or Wizard's Lightning at this point. Oh, okay, sweet, we got there. So that's perfect. And that was actually, you know, pretty important, I think, finding it this turn, because, you know, we're already down to 9. They probably just give their Spirit Dance protection from blue and just attack for lethal next turn. So finding that was pretty big. Although having said that, if we didn't draw the Wizard's Lightning there, we could have just played Soulscar Mage instead, which then means that we have a way to block. But again, they have multiple ways around that, right? They could get Demonic Ruckus to give it Trample and Menace. They could have an aura that gives it Flying, for example. But yeah, in terms of sideboarding, I didn't really get a chance to talk about that because I just skipped straight through. But I feel like the main deck is already really well set up for this matchup, right? We already have a lot of cheap interaction. Okay, this hand is it's rough. I'm going to keep it just on the fact that if we draw a wizard here, especially a 1-mana wizard, we're golden. Okay, I mean, that's not as good as a Soulscar Mage or a Symmetry Sage, but that does make Flame of Anor, Wizard's Lightning, and Slickshot Shaft online. Okay. This is pretty awkward. So I think I'm still going to plot the Slickshot Shaft. I'm definitely not going to play it out here because that will give them a good target for Sheltered by Ghosts. We ideally want to be able to go show off into Flame of Anor or Wizard's Lightning, but yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate. We did keep a risky hand here, but you know, I think we would have got really paid off if we'd found a cheaper Wizards. Okay, wow, they stop at 5, which is odd. I mean, I think we just have to try and go for Flame of Anor here. And I think it's best to use it now. Maybe it's best to do it during the upkeep. I could be wrong on that. I'm just praying they've got an interaction spell rather than the Shard Mage's Rescue. Wow, Fragment Reality. Okay, perfect. But yeah, still not 100% sure. That could have been a misplay. Maybe, I mean, obviously it ended up working out because they had Fragment instead of Shard Mage's Rescue or Loran's Escape or whatever, but I feel like it's probably slightly more optimal to do it during their upkeep, because unless, you know, all of their interaction is 1 mana, or sorry, all of their protection spells are 1 mana, so... But either way, here we just go Slick Shot, Show Off, get more pressure in play, Wizard's Lightning to take out the Giver of Runes, and this is kind of what I was talking about, right? If you can keep all their creatures off the board, you don't really need to race that much, you just need 1 or 2 creatures in play, because their deck basically just peters out once they run out of threats. Okay, so they got another Light Pause, but no 3rd land, so we can just Wizard's Lightning. And now we've also got Snapcaster Mage up as well, so... Yeah, okay, opponent just keeps up. We got there, nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this looks good. Bit awkward that we got 2 Fiery Islets, because the damage from that will add up. But the rest of the hand looks decent, right? We got 2 threats, early interaction, and Hymn to the Ages to, you know, keep the cards flowing as well. So very happy to keep this hand for sure. Opponent obviously in the tank about their mulligan. No companion from them, no Lurrus, so not going to be against Boros Auras or the Sacrifice decks, by the looks of things, which is good to know. Okay, just going to edit that out because the opponent took a while to figure out their mulligan decision. But yeah, definitely going to keep this 7 for sure. See what the opponent leads on here. Okay, mulligan down to 5. That's obviously good for us. Wow, down to 4. Okay, rough start for the opponent here. Makes me think they could potentially be on an all-in combo deck, but... You know, there aren't too many of them in Historic at the moment. Okay, maybe not then. So... Interesting that they're running the Pathway. Makes me potentially think they could be on just Boros energy, potentially. Okay, there's the Amp Raptor. So yeah, basically we could have run out a creature first, but I think Guide of Souls is definitely a card that is very good against you and snowballs the game pretty quickly. So I think it makes more sense to just slow down a little bit and just get that Guide of Souls off the board, because it is a kind of a must-answer threat. Okay, Spy Bluff Canal's a really nice draw here. It means we don't take damage every single turn. And I'm just going to take this turn off to get both of our creatures into play here, right? We're not really too worried about 2 Amped Raptors here. Opponent's already pretty low on resources. Okay, but Johnny's a pretty good pickup for them there, though. Thankfully, they tapped out, so we can just freely block with the Symmetry Sage here. Had they had mana available there, they could have potentially blown us out in combat thanks to the first strike. So here, I think I'm going to attack him with the Soulscar Mage only, because... We could potentially race, but I would rather, you know, represent, you know, being able to blow them out in combat to stop them attacking him with the Amped Raptor here. Plus, if we're only going to use 1 spell here, we can get almost max damage from buffing the Soulscar Mage with the Symmetry Sage as well. Again, we could have started attacking him, but we're potentially taking 6 here otherwise. Okay, so opponent attacks with mana available. So I am kind of glad that I held back here, because now we get to kind of blow them out in combat, assuming they don't have anything here. So now we can turn the Symmetry Sage into a 3/3. Thankfully, we block the cat token, which means that if they have a burn spell here, like Galvanic Discharge, maybe if they're still running the nerfed version, then we don't just lose the Symmetry Sage here. Well, we would lose it, but as in... you know, we get to take out the cat token as well. So another Hymn to the Ages is pretty nice. That turns this one in our hand into a draw 2 here. Okay, interesting. So, obviously the 2 options that we got here is either use Play with Fire to take out the Amped Raptor, which I think I'm going to go for here. The other option is obviously go for Hymn to the Ages, which is more mana efficient here for sure, but I also think that just getting the Amped Raptor off the ground will make the you know, later Soulscar Mage attacks better. Okay, so they're running Felia, which is interesting. Oh, wow, and they do actually have a card to blink with it. So they get to blink the Fable here, which obviously gets them another 2-2, but the opponent's still down at 8 here. And we've got, you know, 2 pretty big creatures in play. Now, obviously, Soulscar Mage is going to be less effective when they've got 2 2/2s here, but we'll see what we draw off the Hymn to the Ages to start off with. Okay, that's not bad. So I think we attack first here, and I think I'm going to attack with both, because if they double block, we can obviously use the Ribald Shanty to just take out the other one. And if they single block, we can just use the Ribald Shanty to take out the Felia here. I'm not sure whether it's best. I guess it's probably best to do it now, right? We can obviously buff the Soulscar Mage, but that doesn't really matter since they're champ blocking. By the way, we get to put them down to 5, get to get their Felia off the board. We do need to be wary of our own life total here, though, because, you know, these 3 Fiery Islets have dealt us a lot of damage, so we're already down to 6. We can't afford to play overly offensively here, although, yeah, opponent's pretty far behind, so it shouldn't end up mattering. So it does look like we're just up against regular Boros energy. So I think Stone of Erech, even though it's mainly here for the sacrifice decks, is also good here because it shuts off the Ajani flipping, which is probably their one of the most powerful synergies, and also shuts off Flage as well, which I imagine, you know, we didn't see Luris, so I imagine, although we didn't see Gigantha either, so I wonder if they're, well, I wonder what double pip cards they could be running to not run Gigantha. But yeah, if they're not on Luris, I have to assume they're on Flage, and Stone of Erech, obviously they still get the interaction of it, but it exiles it when it sacrifices, so they can't escape it later. Yeah, and outside of that, I don't really think there's too many other cards that we want to bring in here. Right, we still want a decent density of interaction here because they do have a lot of snowboardy threats that we want to be able to take out straight away. So this hand obviously don't have a 1-mana creature, and we also don't have a 1-mana piece of interaction. So this hand is a little bit slow. Maybe this is supposed to be a mulligan on the draw, but okay, Arena of Glory. So we're almost certain that they're going to be running Flage if they're running Arena of Glory. I mean, we probably could have guessed beforehand, right? I think Flage is the main reason that you would run just straight Boros over a deck like Mardu. Okay, Goblin Bombardment. So I think I'm just going to plot the Slickshot Show off here because, you know, that at the very least allows us to go for Flame of Anor for both modes next turn. I don't think there's anything they can really do to stop that. And even if they don't play anything else too high impact, taking out Guide of Souls is always going to be a good line. Just got to hope they don't have a Ajani here. Wow, they're running Stone of Erech of their own. And Ocelot Pride as well. Okay, so I think that's the card that we're going to have to take out here. Yeah, it's odd that they're running Stone of Erech. Maybe they're main decking it because it's just good against a lot of the decks right now, but it's not particularly good against us, right? I don't think it does anything really. Doesn't stop any of the instants or sorceries going to the graveyard, and we don't actually utilize any of our creatures in the yard. So here I'm going to Flame of Anor, take out the Ocelot Pride because I think that's the most pressing threat. Wow, they don't activate Bombardment in response. I kind of figured that they just take out the show off here. Now we could have left the show off back on defense, but you know, if we do end up blocking the 1/1 here, for example, or just chumping the Guide of Souls, they can obviously take out the Slickshot Show off fairly easily with the bombardment. Okay, they do have a Ajani, which is a bit rough when we have Stone of Erech in hand. You know, we could have potentially gone Stone of Erech, Hymn to the Ages instead of Flame of Anor. But I don't know. I think we only really get punished for that. Well, we only really get punished for what we did if they have exactly a Ajani here. And I kind of felt like, I don't know, maybe they would have still played Ocelot Pride last time because they have the Guide of Souls in play. But I feel like they probably would have flipped a Ajani earlier if they had the opportunity. So I feel like that was probably a top deck. I could be wrong. But yeah, now we're in trouble. I mean, obviously, if we just got the Stone of Erech in play a turn sooner, we would have been in a much better position here. No interaction in the graveyard. I think we just have to lead with Hymn to the Ages and just run out of Stone of Erech here, which is likely not going to be good enough, right? If they have another creature, they can you know, get a trigger off Guide of Souls, activate the Ajani, deal us a bunch of direct damage, and then give another creature of theirs flying. So I imagine we're probably too far behind at this point. But yeah, I think this game just came down to a slow hand, which meant that we kind of got punished for not getting our cards into play sooner because our first few turns were a little bit clunky. Okay, Thraben Charm, exile our graveyard. I mean, I think we're probably just dead here, right? Yeah, so just going to scoop it up and go into game 2. So, but, I mean, overall, I think this should be a good matchup. I think that was mainly just me keeping a bit of a sketchy hand and getting punished for it. Yeah, I feel like, looking back on it, it probably would have been a misplay not to go Flame of Anor on the Ocelot Pride, because if we go Stone of Urek and they have a removal spell, they attack him with the Ocelot Pride, they start getting a bunch of tokens, so... Yeah, I don't know. I'll definitely go back and rewatch that game, see what I think. So this hand's a little bit land heavy, but I still think this is a pretty good hand, right? We've got Soulscar Mage into Stone of Urek into Flame of Anor potentially, and, you know, Stone does make a huge difference in this matchup. I think the two of their best cards against us are Flage and Ajani, and Stone shutting off both of those is really big. Now, we could have also considered bringing in Pithing Needle here, to be fair. Maybe I'm supposed to bring that in as a way to just shut off Goblin Bombardment, because that is another one of their cards that is good against us, even when they don't have Ajani, but I don't know. I don't feel like it's as necessary, and I feel like Stone is generally the more high impact, because if you shut off Bombardment and they have Flage, then the Needle isn't really saving you in that situation. And same sort of thing, I guess, with Ajani, but... Okay, so they do have Ajani on 2. Very glad that we found this Stone here. So now we get to get off the Flame of Anor, and we're definitely going to be taking out the Guide of Souls here. Going to attack in first, just in case they choose to block with the Guide of Souls. Okay, they block with the Cat token. Obviously, we don't have to worry about Ajani flipping here because of the Stone. So now we can get him for 3, kill the token, take out the Guide of Souls, and now Snapcaster Mage is a great draw. Obviously, we don't have anything to flash back next turn, but if we just run out the Den next turn, we can potentially go Snapcaster, flashback Flame of Anor the following turn, which is a huge, huge tempo swing. But yeah, I feel pretty good about this spot. Obviously, we could potentially draw another instant or sorcery here as well, which would allow us to get in for even more damage. So Thraben Charm the Soulscar Mage, which is fine. Not really too worried about that. Okay, Hymn to the Ages is really nice here. That just gives us a way to get in for an extra 3 damage with the Symmetry Sage. Oh, and Ribald Shanty is a nice pickup as well. So just going to attack in here, and then Ajani on its own I really don't care about at all, right? Even sorry, my throat is going a little bit. But yeah, even if they have another cat, like an Ocelot Pride or something, still won't flip because of the Ajani. So I'm happy to just sit here and just keep taking 1 damage. Hopefully save this Ribald Shanty for a more high impact card. But yeah, I feel pretty good about this spot, right? We've got Shanty, which can kill the most problematic creature they play this turn. Then next turn we can just go Snapcaster, flashback Flame of Anor. So we'll definitely take the 1 here. Wow, they don't cast anything else. Okay, I'm just happy to save this Ribald Shanty then. But yeah, here I think we're just going to go for Snapcaster Mage, Flame of Anor. They could obviously have another Thraben Charm potentially. It's kind of odd they didn't cast anything last turn. So it makes me think they might just have a bunch of interaction in hand. But either way, now we can just get to freely take out the Ajani and draw 2 here. Buff the Symmetry Sage. Okay, that's pretty decent. And then, even though Ribald Shanty can't go face, we've still got Den of the Bugbear and Wizard's Lightning to give us good reach. Ah, okay, they had Iganjo, makes sense. Still think that was the right line, though. Wow, they go for Sokken's main phase. I feel like that would have been better. Probably better if they'd done it at instant speed to take out the Snapcaster Mage, but I mean they obviously do that because they think they can race, but with Den of the Bugbear here and Wizard's Lightning, there's no way they're winning this race. So I think opponent definitely would have been better off there to, you know, hold the Sokken's for instant speed interaction. Okay, yeah, opponent just scoops up, so we got there, nice. Okay, so we're going second tier. And yeah, this hand looks good. Obviously, a bit more threat dense than we'd want, but, you know, Soulscar Mage on turn 1 into potentially show off on turn 2. And, you know, show off in multiples in particular is really powerful. So I think, I mean, we'll see what other spells we draw here, but, you know, I could just see going plot, show off, and then just set up for a really powerful turn here. Okay, so it looks like we're against, I mean, could be blue-white, but I imagine it's Jeskai control here, so we could just run out the show off here, but, like, I think with the opponent untapping with 5 mana next turn, we kind of have to get 2 creatures in play here, because it's kind of a disaster if they go like Teferi minus here, really. They could obviously have a sweeper as well, but then they're also shields down for the following turn. So I think getting the show off in play here, rather than plotting it and risking it getting hit by a counter spell, is probably the better line, I think. Okay, Wizard's Lightning's pretty good. So I'm going to lead on the Hymn to the Ages here, see what we draw. We could have obviously gone for Flame of Anor as well, but I feel like I'd be more, like, having that countered is going to be more brutal. I would rather save that for, you know, the opponent's turn, or maybe if they put like a strict Proctor in play, we're able to take it out. I feel like it makes more sense to wait on the Flame of Anor and maximize the value on it. Oh wow, they choose to counter it. I mean, that has to be good for us, right? And now, with this Flame of Anor, I'm kind of tempted to just fire off the Wizard's Lightning here as well, because obviously Control is going to have access to Flage, which does give them some incidental life gain, but if we can get them down to a low enough life total, especially with 2 show-offs in hand, we can potentially have a crazy turn where we just force through a lot of damage. Plus, if the opponent is on a build centered around Stifle effects and the One Ring and Lotus Field and that, they probably have less room for, you know, the kind of interaction you'd expect from a control deck as well, which means that burn spells and stuff like Slickshot Show Off should be more difficult for them to deal with consistently, I think. Wow, they shook in the Sacred Foundry. I'm kind of surprised about that. So, I mean, obviously we're not going to use the Flame of Anor this turn because the opponent has protection from the ring. And with 3 creatures in play, I think I want to plot this Slickshot Show Off. So even if the opponent does go for a sweeper next turn, you know, we still threaten potential lethal depending on what we draw. So opponent choosing not to activate the ring now, which makes sense because it's kind of risky for them unless they have Flage here. They do have Divine Purge, which is a little bit awkward. It's good to know that that is one of the sweepers that they're playing, though. Good information for us. Okay, Snapcaster is a good draw here. So, obviously the risk of going Snapcaster here is if they kill the Snapcaster in response, we don't actually get to recast the Wizard's Lightning. So I'm kind of tempted to fire off the Slickshot Show Off here. But I don't know. I feel like that's still kind of risky, right? If we cast the plotted Slickshot Show Off and the opponent has a removal spell for it, then we can still go Snapcast the Wizard's Lightning. But if they don't use a removal spell, then we're only getting in for 1 damage. If we use the Snapcaster Mage for Wizard's Lightning during our turn, then they can counter it much more consistently with something like a No More Lies. Okay, I'm actually quite happy to see a Mana Confluence from the opponent here, because it means that they're just going to be dealing themselves some damage. So I'm going to pass back here, and if they tap out... I was going to say I'm going to go for Snapcaster Mage Wizard's Lightning here. Potentially put them down to 2, but I want to wait until they tap out, basically. I don't want to do it right now because I feel like, you know, they've obviously got stuff like No More Lies here. If they do tap out for something else here, I'm definitely going to fire it off. If not, I'm probably going to wait until their end step because they might have some proactive lines to go for, which means they have less mana available to answer Snapcaster Mage Wizard's Lightning. And if they do tap out during their end step to stop Snapcaster Mage Wizard's Lightning, we then have double Slickshot Show Off into Flame of Anor, which is going to be lethal. I mean, them having Flage does kind of put a spanner in the works here a little bit, but... And that does obviously gain them a bit of life. But, you know, I still think we're in a pretty good position here. So I'm going to go for the Snapcaster here. And pick up the Wizard's Lightning. So if the opponent does use a removal spell here, it kind of sucks. Okay, wow, they didn't. That's pretty huge. So now we put them down to 5. Presumably the opponent doesn't have a way to kill Snapcaster Mage, or they don't want to use it. Because now we've got an extra attacker in play. Wow, okay. Symmetry Sage is a nice draw here as well. So now we can go Symmetry Sage, show off, Flame of Anor, and, you know, that's going to be difficult for the opponent to stop because we can buff one of our show-offs with the Symmetry Sage. You know, if they don't counter the Flame of Anor, we get to draw 2 as well to give us a decent follow-up play. And the opponent is kind of forced to use something preemptively, you know, maybe kill one of our show-offs, which then allows us to target the other one with the Symmetry Sage. Okay, really hope they don't use Settle the Wreckage here. That would be pretty brutal if they have that, but, you know, we've already seen Purge. I very much doubt they're running Settle as well. Wow, they bounce a show-off with Otawara. Okay, and they fragment this show-off. That's fine. So we get another Symmetry Sage here. So we could buff this Snapcaster Mage by 1, but I actually think I just like plotting show-off and just shipping it back here. Because Flame of Anor obviously doesn't go for lethal, but now the opponent's in trouble, right? They can obviously escape the Flage this turn if they wanted to, but that only takes out one of our Symmetry Sages. And the fact the opponent had to use an Otawara at his interaction last turn, I guess they did have Fragment as well, but, you know, it makes me think they're probably quite light on interaction right now. Well, they Prismatic ending the Snapcaster Mage. I'm surprised they did that rather than the Symmetry Sage here. Okay, they go for Null Drifter, so they've got a 4/4 in play now. But that's fine, we can take that out with Flame of Anor. So I think here we're just going to go Slick Shot, show off. Then Flame of Anor before we attack, just in case they have a counter spell. Could change how we attack potentially. Although, to be honest, I think we're just sending with everything. Because even if they do have a counter spell for this, you know, it'll put them low enough where burn spells off the top will finish them off. I'm a little surprised they didn't escape Flage, because they could have done, right, instead of the Null Drifter. But maybe that would have still left them dead. I'm not sure. Okay, so they Fragment Reality, show off, but if they don't have something else, we still win here, right? Yeah, okay, opponent just keeps up, so we got there. Nice. Stealing game 1 against control always feels good. So this matchup we do want to pivot a fair amount. I like Spell Pierce and Tameo. I also like Pithing Needle. And I like a single Stone of Erech as well to shut off Flage. I don't think we want any more than that, though. So Play with Fire obviously isn't great. I'm tempted to trim on Consider and maybe on Ribbled Shanty as well. Like, we do still want to keep creature removal in for Strict Proctor. But this is the one matchup where I kind of feel like, you know, Shanty not dealing 3 on the first one is a little bit awkward. So Needle, again, is very good against especially the One Ring, but we've seen that their main sweeper of choice is Divine Purge, which is obviously, you know, Needle is pretty weak into, so I think that's a fair trim there. So this hand looks pretty good. Kind of wish that one of these Fiery Islets was like a Spire Bluff Canal instead, but, you know, still pretty decent. Again, this is a matchup where your early life total shouldn't really matter too much. So I'm going to lead on the Tameo here. If they don't have an early piece of interaction, we can start getting card advantage, which is really big in this matchup. Obviously, we've already seen the opponents running Prismatic Ending and Fragment Reality, so I'm not massively optimistic that this will survive, but still feel like we've got a good follow-up play here. So I'm just going to go for Stone of Erech and Symmetry Sage here. I feel like we have to get Stone down this turn because obviously the opponent's going into their turn 3 and they could very well just run out a Flage here, especially after we play Symmetry Sage. Okay, opponent has Proctor but no Lotus Field. We do have a Snapcaster Mage in hand, so we really do want to be able to kill this Strict Proctor, and it also prohibits their... Or it limits their proactive options as well, because some of their strongest curve outs involve Strict Proctor. So going to attack him with both here. Opponent chooses wisely not to block, getting for an extra damage here. We don't need an extra land here. But yeah, already puts them down to 14. No Lotus Field is good to see, but they could obviously have Flage or Null Drifter this turn. Okay, they go for the ring, but obviously Proctor stops their protection here, so going to be getting in for a lot of damage again next turn. Oh wow, they just scoop it up. So yeah, we got there, nice. Okay, so we're going second here. Okay, just going to edit that out because the opponent took ages to... Okay, just had to do a quick edit there because the opponent took a while to pick their hand. But yeah, it looks like we're against either Elves or Mono Green Devotion here. I have to imagine it's probably Devotion, but thankfully we have the Ribald Shanty for Llanowar Elves on turn 1, which should hopefully slow them down a little bit. Okay, so they have a Utopia Sprawl. So in this matchup, they basically have no interaction if they're running like the conventional builds, so there's no real reason to plot the Slickshot Show off here. We might as well just get it into play as quickly as possible. Okay, interesting to see they're on the white splash here. Okay, Flame of Anor is a very nice draw here. I think I kind of want to get extra pressure in play though, and Flame of Anor can be very useful, especially against creatures like Polukranos, so I'm going to hold on to that for now. And using Snapcaster Mage here also just gets an extra threat into play as well, so it helps race. So yeah, Mono Green Devotion is basically just a pure race for the most part. They typically don't have any ways to interact until after Karn comes online, which is a lot later in the game. So now I feel like we can use the Flame of Anor pretty efficiently here without really cutting ourselves off any other plays. And then we get Symmetry Sages in hand as well, which is pretty sweet. So now we get Symmetry Sage down, get in with the Slickshot Show off and the Snapcaster Mage, and the opponent's already down to 11. They don't have anything else in play, so I feel pretty good about this spot. You know, if you can slow down the opponent's ramp, if they do have starts with Mana Dorks as opposed to Utopia Sprawls and Fanatic of Ronuses, then that usually puts you in a good spot. Okay, so they do have Karn. Wonder what they pick off the minus here. Maybe Portable Hole if they're running white. Wow, Stone of Iraq. I don't understand why they would use Stone of Iraq, but either way, we've got lethal here, right? We can Wizard's Lightning face, then Snapcaster Mage, flashback Wizard's Lightning again. So yeah, against Devotion, this is definitely a matchup where we want the Reckless Charge. It's the main reason that we're running it in the first place. And then Pithing Needle is also pretty nice, even though they do have Mana Dorks that play with fire can kill. A lot of their early starts are either Utopia Sprawl or Fanatic of Ronis, where the play with fire doesn't really do anything. And then I prefer Ribald Shanty in this matchup as cheap interaction, purely because it enables you to kill early Mana Dorks, scales up to be able to kill bigger creatures like Fanatic of Ronis, like Polukranos potentially, and also obviously triggers... sorry, what was saying? It triggers the other chorus cards in your deck, like Hymn to the Ages as well. So unfortunately we didn't have early interaction for the Llanowar Elves. It really sucks to have to go Ribald Shanty here instead. This could be a mistake, but I feel like it's more important to get the Slickshot Show off in here just for pure mana efficiency, if nothing else. Now this does potentially enable them to go for a more explosive turn this turn, but oh wow, okay, that's perfect then. Because now, oh wow, okay, Ribald Shanty into Hymn to the Ages also enables us to pull ahead in terms of card advantage. We could obviously just go for both Reckless Charges now while they don't have any reach creatures in play. But I feel like Hymn gives us more options for next turn. And we've also got double Wizard's Lightning to take out creatures if we do need to answer stuff. So I expect this will be a big turn for the opponent, right? They can go double Trailblazer here, draw them a card, and have a lot of mana, yeah. So they ramp into Storm the Festival. I still feel pretty good about this spot, though. I think they'd need a very good Storm the Festival to get back into the game. Okay, that's not a bad Storm the Festival, especially because they can get Portable Hole here. Yeah, okay, that's a little bit rough. So I was going to say, since they didn't find a reach creature, we're actually in decent shape. But now with Portable Hole coming down, we really need to find another threat. Okay, perfect. I mean, we would have had 2 looks at it with the Hymn to the Ages anyway, but we definitely go for the Reckless Charge here. Puts us up to 6, so we can take out both their planeswalkers here. I'm just trying to think if we have lethal though. We got 6 plus... No, but 2 off lethal. So I think instead we just have to focus on limiting their options for next turn. You know, it is always tricky against Devotion to know whether to attack down Cure or not, because redirecting 6 or 7 damage away from face to kill it is... It's a big opportunity cost, but I feel like in spots like this, where they have Utopia Sprawl, they have Nykthos, they have Storm the Festival in the graveyard, it's better to take out the Kiora because it just really limits their options for the next turn. So Cavalier of Thorns is obviously a concern here, but, you know, we're drawing 3 off Hymn to the Ages here, which should hopefully help us find an answer. So, like, Soulscar Mage... Oh, wow. I can say Soulscar Mage into Flame of Anor would be ideal. We don't have quite enough mana to do that if we go Hymn to the Ages as well. There is Flame of Anor. I mean, ideally, we'd love to get Soulscar Mage in place so we can shrink the Cavalier of Thorns at instant speed so we don't lose the Symmetry Sage here, but... Tricky to know what to do. We could obviously use the Flame of Anor to take out the Trailblazer here. It's tough to know what to do. I mean, I'm not too worried about not playing out the Snapcaster Mage, the Soulscar Mage here, because we have Reckless Charge to give it haste next turn. So rather than drawing 2, I think I'm actually going to get the Slick Shot Show Off back and take out the Trailblazer, because now they're in trouble next turn if they don't have something big. Okay, they do have another Storm the Festival, so pretty good draws from the opponent here. I mean, but obviously we'll have to see what they hit off Storm the Festival. Oh, wow, okay, that was very good for us. They got very unlucky there. So now they got Fanatic of Ronus, and I should imagine we've got lethal here. Okay, another Hymn to the Ages is sick. Now we get to draw 4 for 2 mana, which is absolutely insane, especially when so many of our cards are cheap. Okay, now we should definitely have lethal, right? We can go Symmetry Sage, Reckless Charge. So we're definitely going to Reckless Charge the Symmetry Sage. We could Reckless Charge the Soulscar Mage, but I feel like it's probably best to just Reckless Charge one of our flyers and not actually attack with the Soulscar Mage here. So I think if we buff the Symmetry Sage here, we should be good. Right, they've only got Cavalier of Thorns as a blocker. And so we're basically guaranteed to get in for 12 damage here. They kind of have to block the Slick Shot Shaft, which then kills the Cavalier. So unfortunately we weren't able to win the game this turn, and they do get a Cavalier trigger, which gives them another Storm the Festival, but, you know, with 2 Symmetry Sages and a Soulscar Mage and 3 Reckless Charges in the graveyard, I still feel pretty confident about this, although, having said that, they could have a good turn off this Fanatic, right? If they hit and outcast the Trailblazer plus Kiora, they could be good. Okay, they can't minus... I think they have to get Tormod's Crypt here, right, to wipe these Reckless Charges out of the graveyard. Because we don't actually have any other spells to trigger our Symmetry Sages here. I mean, we do have 3 Fiery Islets, so we have a pretty good chance of finding another spell off the top, but if they don't take out these Reckless Charges, unless they have something weird in the card board that I haven't thought about, then we can just use Reckless Charge to buff the Symmetry Sages. Okay, Karn Slilex, I mean, that has to wait a turn to activate, so yeah, opponent just scoops it up, so we got there nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this hand looks good to me. Right, we've got Soulscar Mage on 1, early interaction, we got Consider. All of these 1-mana spells are also great to flashback with Snapcaster on turn 3, so yeah, definitely happy to keep this one. Obviously, it would have been better if we're on the play, but, you know, can't complain. So let's see what the opponent's on here. Okay, so it looks like Mono Green Devotion, if I had to guess. So definitely fire off play with fire here, right? We want to cut them off their acceleration whenever we can. Now, there are a lot of cards that we can't deal with that consistently, so, you know, Fanatic of Ronus is always difficult to kill unless you go, you know, Ribald Shanty in the first couple turns and get it up to intensity 4. Similarly, Kiora is also kind of difficult to deal with without diverting a lot of damage, so, you know, we take the opportunity to stop their ramp when it's those cheap mana dorks that we can just trade up on mana with. Okay, Slickshot Show Off is really good. So getting extra threats in play is really good in this matchup. It's basically just a pure race because they really don't have much interaction. So I'm just going to get Show Off and the other Soulscar Mage down, and then next turn we could go, you know, I mean, obviously it depends on what we find, but we could go Snapcaster, Consider, Play with Fire, Snapcaster, you know, 2 burn spells depending on if they play a creature. They've obviously still got this Trailblazer in exile here. Wow, okay, Symmetry Sage is also another nice one here. So, I think it makes sense to go Snapcaster Mage Consider, because this also gets another threat in play and sets us up for the following turn. I would much rather save Play with Fire here, either to go face if we get in for a lot of damage, or to potentially take out the Trailblazer if they do play it next turn, which they're probably forced to. But, you know, we're going to be representing quite a lot of damage this turn. So opponent goes down to 9, and we have 5 creatures in play, so they're going to need a pretty explosive turn to get back into it. Now, you know, Devotion is pretty good at doing that if they get lucky, but, you know, they would probably need Trailblazer into Storm the Festival into a good hit to have a chance of stabilizing here, I think. Okay, there's the Trailblazer, and they do have 6 mana here, so yeah, there is the Storm the Festival, so this is how they get back into it. If they hit like double Cavalier of Thorns here or something, then this could be tricky. Wow, just Fanatic of Ronus. Okay. So that's great. So now we can go Ribald Shanty, buff a bunch of our creatures. And then maybe we're supposed to crack Fire Out at first, actually, because we're going to crack it here regardless. Right, we've only got 1 mana. We've only got 1 spell and 1 mana. Well, it only costs 1 mana, so we can pretty freely crack the Fiery Islet here. Okay, don't find anything else. So just going to run out of the canal, attack him with everything, and then I think this Play with Fire is almost certainly going to go face. I mean, even if they block double Soulscar Mage, we just go face with the Play with Fire. Get another trigger off the Symmetry Sage, get another trigger off the Show Off. And then, yeah, we should just be good. So, yeah, they do block how we expected. Now we can just go Play with Fire, buff the Show Off with the Symmetry Sage. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up. So, Devotion, this is definitely the matchup for Reckless Charge. And I think I've been liking bringing in a single copy of Pithing Needle here over the Play with Fires. Just because, obviously, Play with Fire going face is good, like we saw last game there. Actually, thinking about it, maybe I'm supposed to cut Wizard's Lightning over Play with Fire, because, you know, the primary purpose of the burn spells in this matchup is to take them off the mana dorks, right? If they lead, you know, they've obviously only got Utopia Sprawl as 1 mana acceleration that isn't a creature, so keeping Play with Fire in over Wizard's Lightning actually makes a lot of sense here, because it means that you know, your burn spells can take out their 1-drop mana dorks, because they don't really have any creatures with 3 toughness, where the difference between 1 and 3 is that big. So this hand was a little risky. We were kind of, you know, if we hadn't drawn the Spybluff Canal, we would have had to go Island, Symmetry Sage, Consider, and try and find another land. And obviously, if we miss lands in all those draw steps, that's pretty rough, but okay, this is interesting. So we can either go Show Off, which only gets in for 1 damage, or we could go Soulscar Mage plus Consider, which enables us to get in for 3, which I think I prefer that. You know, we do want to... Well, Kiora, especially when they've got Utopia Sprawl, is their best acceleration. I think we're going to bin anything that isn't a land here. Okay, perfect. Found a land off the top. So now we get Kiora down to 4 loyalty. I think it's good to attack Kiora especially if the opponent has Nykthos or Utopia Sprawl, but if they're at a high life total, I think it makes sense to deny them the ramp. I mean, having said that, they're going to have 6 mana this turn, so this is a potential turn 3 Storm the Festival, which would be tricky to race. Okay, so they don't have Storm, or maybe they choose not to cast Storm the Festival, but Trailblaze is still a good setup card here for sure. Okay, and Pelucranos, so not a bad turn for the opponent. Okay, Ribble Shanty's interesting here. So we're definitely going to be taking out the Trailblazer for sure. So I think, yeah, we Ribble Shanty the Trailblazer, and then I think we attack Kiora with both creatures, and if they try and block the Soulscar Mage here, or if they try and block either creature, we can just shrink the Pelucranos in response to the block, which keeps either of our creatures alive here. And the nice thing is now we don't even have to use the Ribble Shanty here, right? We can use the Play with Fire to shrink the Pelucranos instead. Takes out the Kiora. Now, we have redirected a decent amount of damage away from face this game, but I feel like getting Kiora off the board really limits the opponent's proactive options. Elish Norn into drawing a Snapcaster Mage isn't ideal, really. I'm going to lead on him to the Aegis here just because we do need to unlock our hand a little bit more. I was really hoping to find a land there. I mean, we can still go for Pithing Needle, or we can go for Reckless Charge here. I think with the opponent at 20, I kind of want to hold on to the Reckless Charge. Again, I feel like we're in a spot where we just want to try and limit the opponent's options. And I still think I like naming Kiora here just because they've got Utopia Sprawl. And if they do play Karn soon, I mean, I guess they do have access to Portable Hole, which is pretty good, but Kiora is the main card I'm worried about here because that snowballs the game a lot harder. I feel like they're not at the top end yet. Okay, now they are, right? Now they've got double Cavalier triggers, so I am worried about, Karn can grab some pretty impactful stuff now. And they do find Nykthos as well, so pretty tricky spot, especially considering we're missing land drops as well. So we have quite a few options this turn. I think we can attack here because of the Soulscar Mage, right? We can attack with the Show Off and the Symmetry Sage and then represent using the Ribble Shanty to take out the Cavalier at instant speed. We could also just fire off the Ribble Shanty on the Fanatic. But I don't really feel like that actually slows the opponent down that much, considering they've already got, a ton of lands in play and Nykthos. I think I'll attack with both, because even if they block the Cavalier, even if they block the Show Off with the Cavalier, we can, we can put it down to a one power creature, so both of our creatures survive regardless here. It is a little bit awkward that they get the best card back from their graveyard here, but at least we're getting in for some damage. And we take out their only blocker that has reach as well. Not to mention that Nykthos becomes a lot worse now as well. I mean, having said that, they can still Storm the Festival and have mana available to use Nykthos with, so I still think we're probably behind here, but yeah, okay, especially with Karn. Presumably they can get Portal to Phyrexia here, right? Because they still have 4 mana from the Fanatic. I mean, I'll see what they get, because it could be useful information. Not all builds are running Portal to Phyrexia. Okay, they do get Portal, so yeah, there's no way we're beating that, unfortunately. So that was kind of a combination of a pretty good start from the opponent and us just kind of missing lands. Or maybe, I don't know, I'll definitely have to watch that one back, but maybe we'd have had a better chance if we'd gone face instead of taking out Kiora, but it's hard to say. I feel like for the most part, if they're at a high life total, it's usually worth going after Kiora first. So this hand, again, is very risky for sure, but turn 1 Symmetry Sage with spells to back it up, especially when they're Consider, which helps us dig towards whatever we need. So in this situation, it would obviously be lands. So again, there's definitely a fail rate with this sort of hand, but against Devotion, these are the sorts of starts we want. Right, if we can go Symmetry Sage, consider, find a second land, cast a second Symmetry Sage, then we're off to the races. Then we're really accelerating. And, you know, Devotion aren't always going to have Sprawl into Kiora, right? Some hands are going to be a little slower. So especially on the draw, you know, I back these sorts of hands to be able to race, presuming you find land drops with your considers. So yeah, opponent in the tank here about keeping their hand, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with this one. If we especially if we can curve out to the third land, if we can use consider to find a third land on curve here, and then Flame of Anor potentially take out like a Polukranos, that would be perfect. So opponent obviously in the tank here. Okay, yeah. So they keep a 7. Even though we, you know, with a second consider, it's safer to go for consider first. But like I said, this matchup is all about racing. Even if we do miss the second land, we still start getting in every turn. Oh, wow. Okay, perfect. So now we've got the Steam Vents. Could obviously go for the show off, but then we're missing out on potential 3 damage from this Symmetry Sage. So, and again, with the Flame of Anor here, I think, yeah, I was going to say, I think we're going to bin anything that isn't a land. So now we found the third land. Now I feel really confident about this start. We got double Symmetry Sage. Their best card they could play here is Polukranos, which we already have the answer for. Okay, they go for another Sprawl and a Delighted Halfling. Wow, they only kept to 1 lander. But they do have double Sprawl here, obviously. So we're definitely going to use the Flame of Anor here. Just slow them down a bit. I mean, having said that, double Utopia Sprawl, if they have a Kiora here, they could have a pretty good turn next turn. But, you know, we're already applying pressure. We've already put them down to 11. We've got Snapcaster Mage here as well. Which is obviously good at buffing the Symmetry Sages and potentially killing their other creatures. Okay, they do have the Kiora, so I think that's the, you know, that's the card they needed to have in this spot to have a chance of getting back into it. Okay, they do have the Polukranos, so now we've used the Flame of Anor. That's a little bit awkward, but we can go show off double consider here, right? Which is pretty good. And I think at this point in the game, we're better off just going face. You know, when the opponent is already at a low life total, I think these are the sorts of spots where you just have to go face. So now we can buff the show off and the Symmetry Sage. I was trying to find like a Wizard's Lightning or a Play with Fire just to deal even more damage, but we should still be good here, right? Been a Reckless Charge. So yeah, we put him down to 1. And with this Reckless Charge in the yard, I'm hopeful that we can set up lethal next turn. I mean, unfortunately, we don't have any burn spells, right? If we had a Play with Fire or something, that would be ideal. But yeah, I still feel pretty good about this spot. Even if we don't go... well, it depends what other reach creatures they play, but we can still go Snapcaster Mage into Flame of Anor, take out the Polukranos, and then they would need, you know, 2 other reach blockers to stop the Symmetry Sage and the show off. So that's my current game plan here, right? I mean, obviously, we'll see what they play. If their last card is like a Crawl Harpoon or something, then that definitely changes things. But Mono Green Devotion typically doesn't have like an actual sideboard. The vast majority of their sideboard slots are usually just Karn Wishboard targets. So they do have a lot of mana here, right? They untap this. They have 5 mana now. And they do have the Cavalier of Thorns, but if that's their last playable card, we should be good, right? We can just go Snapcaster, Flashback, Flame of Anor, take out the Polukranos, attack him with both. Yeah, we should be good here then. So yeah, now we go Flame of Anor, take out the Polukranos, draw 2, and then just go face with both attacks. So we got there, nice.